Hey everyone, Jennifer Lee Chan here from NBC Sports Bay Area. Thanks for tuning into my YouTube page. It is Thursday, and I don't know what day it is because it's been such a crazy week. I was up in San Francisco last night, so I posted that video about from the Oakland airport. Sorry, the sound was not great. I didn't bring my freaking heavy mic with me, but I have it here today, so the sound should be much better. Um, just recorded a podcast with Matt Maiocco, so we have a new 49ers Talk podcast dropping tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. So definitely tune into that. But for now, going to talk about a little bit about what John Lynch said to Cam Inman and Matt Barrows yesterday at the Stanford Pro Day. Had actually saw Cam Inman last night. He helped transport me from the San Francisco airport to near Chase Center, Harmonic Brewing Company, where I spoke on a panel in front of a lot of lovely ladies, and then dropped me off at the Oakland airport on his way home. So late night last night and early morning. But John Lynch is telling everybody that there's a plan. There is a plan that they are going through, and that is what's happening. That's why the roster, there's a complete exodus from it. And but he says everything should be fine. So here is what John Lynch said to Cam Inman. We've got this thing called the draft, and we've got a lot of picks. He said the things fans should know is we have a plan and we're going to execute that plan. We're excited about the opportunity. Now, I do think that they believe that they're going to get a lot of productive contributors from the draft. He also said, we're really excited about the way this draft stacks up and how our picks are coming together and the process. This is the fun part. The starting defensive line for the 49ers on this roster, if we were to go now into a game, they have 75 players on the active roster. It would be Nick Bosa, Jordan Elliott, Kevin Givens, and Yetur Gross-Matos. Not necessarily household names. So, they let go Leonard Floyd, Malik Collins, Javon Hargrave. We knew about Javon Hargrave kind of weeks before. I didn't see them releasing Leonard Floyd and Malik Collins, who instantaneously got picked up by other teams. So, uh, John Lynch also said the bottom line is you're always looking years out. As we forecasted, we obviously have some big things coming our way. Brock Purdy's contract, and you have to clear the requisite room to be able to do that. Guys like Leonard Floyd and Malik, believe me, their impact was felt. They were great. It's nothing they did wrong. We just felt it was the time to do it. We're excited about what we can add and replenish. So replenish is the key word. They are going to try to draft players who will contribute on the defensive line. And this is the draft to do it. The draft is deep, and especially at defensive edge and defensive tackle. Everyone I spoke to at the combine was saying 49ers can get a really good starter in the first round at 11. They can get a guy who plays a lot of snaps in the second round at 43. And they can get other guys that are defensive linemen to be contributors throughout the draft. And if you look at all the positions on the team, defensive line is the one that really stands out as where they have hardly any players from the previous year. Special teams, yes, they have added quite a few players because that was clearly an emphasis, similar to 2022 when they added Oren Burks. They added Ray McLeod and George Odom. Now, George Odom is still on the team, obviously. Sorry, that was my alarm for the nap I took because I was so tired. Clearly, I'm up ahead of that. Um, but they have brought in Richie Grant, who's a safety who has played a ton of special teams. Suron Neal from Miami, he's played a ton of special teams as well. Trey Brown from Seattle, Jason Pinnock from New York Giants, he's a safety. So they've added a lot of players in that defensive backfield, not necessarily starters, but definitely guys who have contributed on special teams. And so I really feel like that's where they have added to the roster. Also, Demarcus Robinson, I think he's a guy who is going to contribute a lot as well until Brandon Ayuk comes back. So, yes, they need to draft a wide receiver, but I think it's wide receivers are tough with Kyle Shanahan's offense. They don't necessarily come in week one and set the stage on fire. I think Ricky Pearsall is going to have a really good year because he's going to have an off season. He's going to have a full training camp. But I think the real need is at defensive lineman. I think You look at um, D. Winters. Fred Warner loved him last year and thought he was the best guy at training camp, most improved. He's a guy that probably will get that starting position. He's going to compete, obviously, next to play next to Fred Warner. You look at cornerback, Renardo Green, Diamador Lenore, um, at safety, Malik Mustafa, Jair Brown. So those positions aren't necessarily set, but they have guys who have played a lot of football for the 49ers. They're going to be there. Not necessarily that they've improved at that position because Dre Greenlaw, Talon Ufunga, Charvarius Ward are really, really good players and they are no longer on the team. But it's a decent place to start. They have solid players that are contributors, but they're just going to have to step up their game and play better. And maybe with playing more snaps, they will. But defensive line is the one where you really see the attrition and the exodus of the roster. And I think they really have to address that in the draft. And they did not address it all in free agency. They re signed Kevin Givens, and that is the only move they've made on the defensive line. I thought they'd pick up another guy or two. Maybe they will. There's still some time. There's some guys that, maybe would cost $2 to $4 million that they can bring in to maybe do a 1 or 2 year deal with. Maybe that happens, but I think they're really focusing on the draft. The thing that worries me a little bit is that the draft is fluid. You don't know who's going to be picked in front of where your team picks. You don't know who's going to move up, grab the player you had your eye on. But it is a really good class of defensive linemen, tackles, and edge rushers. So they've got to hit on them. That's the thing. They've had picks in the past at the top of the draft. You think Drake Jackson, who had injury issues, Javon Kinlaw, injury issues. They cannot afford to have a player like that miss. So the big thing on the horizon, obviously, is Brock Purdy's contract. Um, I think that's where they really need to get that done. They also have to get extensions done for George Kittle and potentially Fred Warner going forward. George Kittle's on the last year of his contract. He wants more guaranteed money and he deserves it. They want him to retire a 49er. So that means he's got to get another deal done. Here's another thing that John Lynch said. You don't want to get to a point where you have to do things to keep your roster afloat. You have to have that flexibility. That is the one thing people should realize. We've been really blessed and fortunate that ownership has allowed us to go. And last year we had such a good roster that we doubled down and said, let's go for this thing. We pushed all the chips in, knowing that at some point you'd have to have the reset. And this was that year. So it is a reset. It is a purge the roster of anyone who has excess money going out. I just didn't think it was going to be this extreme. When he said that, I kind of understood. Javon Hargrave, they weren't going to sign Talanoa Hufanga back, Charvarius Ward, those big ticket guys. I thought they would keep Leonard Floyd and Malik Collins. Honestly, I didn't feel like they cost that much money. But I mean, it's not my money. So just this draft is so important. This is quite possibly the most important draft for the 49ers since Kyle and John took over. So we'll see what happens. And, it's John Lynch said, we like the ads we made. It's not the biggest names like past years, but we like the guys we've added to our team. It's been a lot of special teamers. And he did say they made a late push to try to keep Dre Greenlaw in the Bay Area. He said, we've seen when healthy what a fabulous player he is. He's a difference maker. Really grateful to Dre for all the contribution he made to the Niners. Special player. It's hard to see guys like that leave, but it's part of this business. You can't keep them all. So it was kind of a rude awakening for the 49ers, maybe the 49ers fan base, maybe guys inside the locker room that didn't know what the plan was. But we'll see how it all comes together. The draft is at the end of April. We still have several weeks. Next weekend, I'll be heading to, not this weekend, a week from this weekend. So in about 10 days, 8 days. It's so hard for me to keep days straight right now. 8 days, I'll be heading to Palm Beach, Florida, where it is the NFL annual meetings. We'll have a talk with Jed York and John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan. We haven't talked to Kyle Shanahan since, before the combine. Yeah, so because he didn't go to the combine. Anyways, all right, that's it for today. It's Thursday, and yeah, that's it. This is one of the most important drafts for the 49ers going forward because you're going to pay the quarterback a ton of money. You've got to have a team around him. They've got to draft well. All right. If you have any comments or questions, please leave them in the comment section. Also, please subscribe, tell your friends. I really appreciate everybody who comments all the time and stays tuned to everything I have to say. I really appreciate it. So let's try to get this audience even bigger. So let's go. All right, here we go. Talk to you guys soon.